Okay, what we're going to focus on this uh, lecture video is what's called a router in Express. And we've dealt a little bit with routes, and I got a good question about, you know, what's the benefit of hitting a route in Express versus just like a static page? And I might have to close down some stuff. My laptop is not responding quickly. I'm just going to have to deal. And so the answer to that question, is a static HTML file is just that. It is going to be the same file every time. And when you use Express to serve static HTML, every user who gets to that endpoint will get the same page. What we're going to do a lot more in this class is we're going to generate dynamic responses. And so when you hit a route, which is an endpoint for a resource, that route is going to generate a dynamic response from the server. Maybe you give it a username and password, and it's going to log that user in for those credentials of that user. And so you logging in, you might get a different response page than if I were to log into the site. It's going to have different histories, different carts, different all sorts of information that comes back from the server. And so we're primarily going to be working with the routing side of Express, and we're not going to do a whole lot dealing with static pages, but I just wanted to show a static page. And I think that just caused that little bit of confusion of what's the difference there. And so it really boils down to static response versus dynamic response. For repetition, we're going to start another folder, just call it Express Router, and open with code. And repetition helps, kind of starting from scratch. So nice and clean, no dependencies. Let's open up a terminal. And the first thing we'll do is npm init/y. And that'll get us a package JSON. And now let's bring in some dependencies. npm I express. And I'm just going to try and keep it minimal, server.js. And let's bring in our import express from and I believe it was express dot we got to build our app. Const app equals express. This is the syntax to build our app. Okay, so this creates our web application. Then we're going to make one route with app.get. This is our landing page. With a request and a response object. And we're going to say res dot send. Hello world. And let's listen for our app. And so we'll do app.listen. And let's make a variable for our port. Const port equals port 5000, app.listen on port. Arrow function, console.log. And here, do the backticks. So we can do something like http://localhost slash port. Okay, so bare bones Express app. We import Express, we boot it up, we make a single route, we listen on port 5000. And let's see what mistakes I made. In order to boot this up, we're going to run node server.js. And it's MJS, so that's the first thing. Without even reading the error message, I remembered this is the new file extension. Let's try that again. And can't find a module, cannot use import statement outside a module. Import Express from Express. So we're in a module. So, silly mistake, I have to type server.mjs. Okay, and we say listening on local on port, and I can control click, and I forgot a colon 5000. It's not a slash 5000. So HTTP localhost colon 5000. So that's a little syntax error, but that does get back hello world. So go back to my source code. It's not / 5000, it's colon 5000. And now, if I control C and I rerun that, control click, and we have one route configured. Okay, now there's more that I typically do with NodeMon and things like that, but this just gets Express up and running at a bare bone and debug and all this other, all these other packages. But I want to focus on routing. And so what we learned about routing so far is that we can have different endpoints. Again, these are all dynamic responses from the server. So I can do a GET request for contact and a GET request for about me. And we're going to get, now it's right now it's a static response, so it's not a very good example of a dynamic response from these routes, but we're getting there. About me. Okay, and close it down, rerun it, control click. Whoops, somewhere. Slash about me, it's the about me route, contact, it's the contact page. Close that down, close the server down. So we have our basic Express page. We've got a couple different routes. Suffice to say that our web pages might have many routes. Maybe if you have a lot of different pages, 10 pages, 20 pages, 30 pages, and a little bit of organization instead of cluttering your main entry point file, which is server. This is where your server is booted up. And, as we like to separate our concerns as developers and not put routing concerns inside of our Express logic, this is really our Express logic. We can take those routing pieces out into another file, and that's what we are going to do. Um, And so what I will do is make a router and explain what a router is. And so I want to go ahead and in my folder, I'm going to make a subfolder called routes. And inside of routes, I'll create a subfolder called API. And here, I'm just going to make a new file. These are going to be my users. And so, um, you know, most websites have users, and so this would be routes for those users for creating new users, you know, letting users reset their password, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so, if you stop and think about, the URL for users, ultimately we're going to be hitting these endpoints inside of this file. Whatever the route may be that we set up, when we go to, for example, create a new user, in other words, register a new user, it's going to be inside of this path, um, inside of the routes folder and the API folder. And so let's take a look at what a route looks like in here. So inside of users, and again, I'm going to rename this to MJS. There is a little trick that you can just keep it .js and change a setting inside of your package JSON. I'll show that at some point. Um, and so the first thing I want to do is bring in Express and bring in Express Router. So just like before, we had to bring in Express from Express. And here we're going to bring in a router is express.router. And so we're going to make our endpoints here. And so, for example, if a user, now we can use router.get. And so this router is kind of has the same methods as your Express app. So over here, we had our Express app, and we could say app.get. Over here, we create just a router. It's essentially our Express app, but only obviously the routing portion. And we're going to say, what is the URL? I'm going to say register. Like you're going to register a new user, it's /register. And let's bring in, just like we did before, res curly brace. And let's console log register new user route. Okay, and because this is our own module, what we do at the bottom is we actually export our router. This is our router variable that we created as user router. And so this is kind of your first example of making a variable in this case. This variable is called router, and this variable is actually being exported out of this module, this users module. Okay, and really all we did was say, hey, when we go to register, we're going to log this out. Back on the server file, okay, now we're going to basically use that router. And so we exported it in the one file, so we need to import it over here. So I'm going to go import user router from, and it kind of filled that in for me as far as routes API users MJS. So now we have this variable called user router, and it's available in our server file. So we kind of made this variable over here. We registered a route, and we export that router. Back on our server, we import the router, and we need to set it up with an app.use command. So we're going to say app.use, and this will be the path that the user types. So if they type in API/user, that will get them to the user router. We do comma user router here. So what this allows us to do is for our users, we can define a whole bunch of routes. The first one is just a register. Now the full URL, you kind of piece them together here. It is going to be API/user/register. And if you follow that full path, that gets you to the endpoint. So you kind of prefix the route here. You give it the full path here. This says go to the root of your app, then go to routes API users MJS. And then this would be this line. This is the path the user would follow to the endpoint. This is the path to the module for the user router. So let's test this. At this point, we've kind of segmented out some routes, and well, at least one route, and let's test it. So let's kind of boot this up, and let's go here. And if I follow the full path, which is /API, API/user/register. Let's pause. Because it looks like it's going to spin and not work. So it was doing what I coded it to do. I did hit my route. You'll notice it did do a console log, and there's my register new user route. But I actually didn't send a response back to the client. So what I need to do is res.send, and we can just send some string, welcome to the register new user route. And close that down, boot it back up. Listening on localhost /API/user/register, and we hit the route. So our router is working now. You might go, okay, I'm confused. Why are we doing this router? Again, it just boils back to you really don't want a server.js file that is overly cluttered with routes. You want to kind of extract those routes out into their own files, and then therefore every route that you have for a user, maybe you get a register, maybe we have like an update password page, right? And so we change the console log to say, and so now we're registering our new routes inside of this file, users MJS. And again, you've separated the concerns out, and you're not going to overburden your server file with routes. Um, One more thing I'll note once I demo this, let's go ahead and close, boot it back up. So we've got slash API slash users. Is it users or user singular? User singular. Slash register. New register route. Change password. Let's update password, I said. Update password. So this is allowing us to hit different routes, and you can see these get routes. It is also worth mentioning, if you're getting a route for a new user, what does this mean? Typically, when you're getting a route for a new user, you're going to return the HTML page with a registration form, right? So when you have a get request, it's typically going to get an HTML page and send that back. It's also very common, router.post. Realize these routes might have different methods that they're associated with. Rec, res, arrow function here. And this would be the post route, register new user route. I'll say post new user route. And now I will do a res.send working. It's worth pointing out here, your web browser is really good at doing get requests, but you can't, in order to get a post to run, you would actually have to code up a web form and have that web form post back to the server. It's not exactly an easy thing, very quick thing to test. And for that reason, there is a tool that you should go ahead and download called Postman. And Postman is a tool that we will learn to use in this class. I'll go ahead and maybe sign in. Hopefully I have my credentials cached. So you'll have to create an account. It's free. But Postman, because a web browser cannot easily do a post, it allows us to test our different routes, be it a post route, in a separate tool. And so, again, we'll kind of go through a little bit of Postman, how to use it. But what I need to do is download Postman. It's a desktop tool. Because I don't think I have it on this laptop. Okay, now that I've got that downloaded, let's install it. And we'll do a deeper dive on this. I just want to introduce the tool. Okay, not worried about two-factor right now. Let's go to my workspaces, my workspace, and you can see some other work that I've been done in the past. And I'll just call this, what was this called? This collection was called a router demo. And now let's generate a new add a request to start working. There we go. This is a get. So what is? Let's go back to our routes. And we saw that we have a register get request. So we'll call this register user. And so instead of using the browser to test our server-side app, we're going to use Postman. So we'll say get register user. http://localhost, I believe 5000 API user slash register. And this is simply using this desktop tool to hit my web application instead of the browser. And you can see that it received the response. Okay, but I all started this because I can't really do post requests. And so in order to create a post request, this route worked, and I can go ahead and save this and close it. But let's add another request. So let's go right here, add request. This will be a post new user. And so you change the method to post http://localhost 5000 API user register. It's the same URL, it's just a different HTTP method. The method is a post. So the idea is on the get of this route, you respond with the web form. And then on the post is when you actually save the user to the database. And I get an error, cannot post to API user register. Let's see. There's probably some additional configuration needed real quick. There was not a problem with my code. The problem that I had, you can see now if I post, I'm getting the response of working, which is what we're sending back right here in the response. All that was happening was I had to close down my server and restart it to get the changes. As we remember, nodemon is our friend here, and I could run nodemon server.mjs, or better yet, we would put a script in. Let me remind you how to do that script, and that'll be the end of the video. So to get nodemon up and running, I want to go to my package JSON, and I'm going to add two scripts. The first script is start for my development, node server.mjs, and this will be start dev, which will start up nodemon with a switch for .env server.mjs. And that's a nice convenient. We installed nodemon globally, so now to run this, I'll clear my screen. I will say npm, so no longer node here, this says npm. Run will run a script. Start dev is the name of our script. And because I don't have .env installed, I'm going to get rid of this switch for now to make this happy. Close, run the same command, and there we go. And so now if I were to add a new route over here, maybe a post, router.post /update password. You can see I click Control Save, it immediately rebooted. If I go back over here and click on, if I change my route, now I like to save these because then you can close them and reopen them up, and all the routes already there. So instead of just overriding that one, because that is a good route, I'll add a request here. We'll call this post update password. So we're going to go to a post request, http ://localhost 5000 API user change password, and it's a post. If I hit that right, let's see, update password. I do it every time. Update password. And we hit our post request. So a very useful tool is this Postman and Postman and nodemon, useful tools. So I'll stop this video here to be done talking about routes for now.